Good morning. It's Tuesday morning here at the bridge. We're here for a blessing from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 6 as we continue with the Lord's Prayer. But before we do that, I have a question for you. One of the things that distinguishes us guys is this little lump in the middle of our throat that's called the Adam's apple. My question is, did you ever wonder where that name came from? Well, I think you know where it came from. It came from the story of Adam and Eve and the apple, the fruit. But the history of that phrase as it relates to the throat is very interesting. It actually originates in the literature of the 1600s, where it first appears in the form of a legend that Adam, when he ate the forbidden fruit, part of the apple lodged in his throat and caused a lump, and that condition was passed on to his descendants. A pretty silly story. I don't think it's true. Pretty silly story, but the reality of temptation and evil and sin is not silly. It's not a legend. We know that it's true. We know that the story of Adam and Eve is true. And we know that it's true especially because it made its way into the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples. And we come to that part of the prayer in the words, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." It's really two prayers, or a prayer in two parts. Let's take them one at a time. First, we are to pray, "Lord, lead us not into temptation." What? Why would we ask the Lord not to lead us into temptation? We know that the Lord does not lead us into temptation. He doesn't tempt us. That is the devil. He is the tempter. That's one of the names that is given to the devil. But we know from James chapter 1 that when we are tempted, we're not to say that God tempted us, because God is not tempted with evil, neither does he tempt any man. So we know that that's true. So when we pray, "Lord, lead us not into temptation," it must mean something different. Here's what I think it means. I think it means that we're to ask God to shield us from the tempter, to not allow him to lead us into temptation. The devil is powerful, but he is under the control and under the authority of God. In the story of Job, Job asked permission from God to afflict Job, and God allowed it. And so we are in that part of the prayer to ask God to shield us from the tempter, that he would not allow him to tempt us. Now, in the ideal world, we would never be tempted. God would have a little bubble around us, and we would be constantly, every day, shielded from temptation. In the real world, that's not true. We're tempted every day to do something that we shouldn't do, or not to do something that we should do. And so that's a good prayer. "Lord, lead us not into temptation. Don't allow the tempter to tempt us." The second part of the prayer, however, is a prayer for the real world, where we are tempted to evil. So the second part of that prayer is, "Deliver us from evil." Now that is something that God does do. He doesn't tempt, but he does deliver us from evil. He delivered Lot from evil. Remember, Lot lived in the wicked city of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham, his uncle, God used Abraham to deliver him from that evil and from the punishment that was coming upon the city. God delivered King David. You remember David, who was hunted like a wild animal by King Saul. And one day, David came upon the encampment of Saul and found Saul asleep. What an opportunity to take him out. And all of the men around David were saying, do it, do it, do it. Take your sword and slay him. But David wouldn't. He said, I will not lift my hand against the Lord's anointed. So God delivered David from evil. Jesus delivered Peter from further evil when Peter was ready to take out all of the soldiers who were going to arrest Jesus. And he got as far as the ear of the servant of the high priest. He sliced it off, and then Jesus rebuked him and kept him from further evil. And so God does deliver us from evil. That's a real world prayer. Lead me not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. There is a picture in the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, of the tempter. And that is with the story of Cain and Abel. You remember where Cain slew his brother Abel? He was tempted and he committed that evil act. And then God counsels him about the future, and he says, look, sin is always going to be lying right at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. You must control that. And this part of the prayer is one way that we can master the tempter. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So today, as you're faced with whatever temptation comes your way, pray both parts of that prayer. Pray that God would shield you from temptation, but when tempted, that He would deliver you. Have a wonderful Tuesday. I hope you'll be with us tomorrow at our Wednesday Bible study as we continue in the parables of Jesus. And tomorrow night, it's the parable of the Good Samaritan. Hope to see you then. God bless.